Radio Free Skaro!
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Radio Free Skaro, episode number 922. I am Stephen in Edmonton.
We're in Vancouver.
And Chris in Edmonton.
It's a packed show here today. A bunch of news and a chat with Toby Hadoke about Quatermass. Yes, the 70th anniversary of Quatermass is this year as well, and Toby's part of a live reading of the Quatermass experiment happening this Saturday, September 9th at Alexandra Palace. Tickets, I think, might be still available. They might be close to sold out. So anyway, we talk about that and the history of the show and everything else. And I watched Quatermass in the Pit, which is the third one that came out on Blu-ray, and it was really good. It was live TV. I didn't actually realize that until after I watched Quatermass in the Pit, but it was live. All three of them were actually broadcast live, which is fascinating.
Even the 2004, 5, whatever one with David Tennant and Mark Gatiss was live, wasn't it?
Which one did you watch, Stephen? The 50s one, or
I watched the Quatermass in the Pit, the 58, 59 6-part series. The first two episodes, the ones they telerecorded from 53, are on YouTube, I believe, and I think all of Quatermass 2, which is good but not as good apparently, as I haven't seen that one yet, but I don't know about 3. I know that one came out on Blu-ray, and I know I think all three of them came out in lesser quality on a DVD in 2005, so you have to dig around for a little bit, but I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed Quatermass in the Pit, so that's coming up later on in the show, and that's like a longer interview because it's Toby Hadoke, and we like to talk, and it's fun. So I hope you enjoy that, but there's a whole bunch of news to get to, so let's get to it right away. And that is this. On Jessica Gardner, who's a new co-producer of Doctor Who for the upcoming season. No idea if it's any relation to Julie Gardner or not. I don't think so.
That was my first question.
Yeah,
there are 3 names in England. That is one of them.
That's true. There's not a lot of names although I will admit I did do some searching around, like everywhere. Like, what does he look like? He doesn't quite look like Julie Gardner, but who knows? Anyway, on her CV, on her agency website, she says that she is co-producer of Doctor Who, and that it is in production from July 2023, so they probably started pre-production then, to May 2024. Oh, wow, that's like 10 months of Doctor Who about to enter into production. Ncuti Gatwa on his Instagram
for 8 episodes.
For 8 episodes.
Or 9 episodes.
Yeah, Ncuti Gatwa posted on his Instagram, ready for season 2, as in season 2 of his, at the gym, of course, because that's what Ncuti Gatwa likes to do, is work out and look great. So he's all amping up for it. So yeah, just like that, after a month break between seasons, series 1 and 2 of the new era, they're right back at it. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Carry on.
Christmas episode notwithstanding, depending on what the BBC decides for broadcast. So is it the spring or not? See last week for details.
Yeah.
They could potentially have both seasons in the can before we see anything from 14.
It's astounding, isn't it? Yeah.
As a fan, I think there can be only one response to this, and that is Doctor Who is doomed.
I know. I mean, I do hope that there is a third series of Ncuti Gatwa happening, because
you just got to keep moving those goalposts so you can feel bad about things.
Well, we're Doctor Who fans, but just because it's almost like, let's get this guy when he's when we fully have control of him,
not insanely in demand, yeah.
Right?
Like which he will be, I guarantee.
Yeah, like he's in
and
Barbie, but
he's
in it, but he's not speaking a lot. And so, he might just become a complete superstar by being in Doctor Who, which is not entirely unusual. And so hopefully we can get it back for Series 3. But yeah, the fact that he's literally going to have 2 seasons in the can before they even show that first one. How lucky are we in that regards? It just it's astounding. Given the last 6 years of what we have, we're basically waiting for a new Doctor Who to come along, and there'll be so much in the can waiting for us to watch.
Well, And
we're
RTD will
still-
be pimping it like crazy, like he does. So that's good too.
I mean, we're still waiting and waiting and waiting for new Doctor Who.
We are, but we also know that it's there.
We know there are 12 episodes in the can right now, and we've seen none of it.
None.
So
not at all. Although, just to jump ahead a little bit, there's we talked a while back. The BBC sort of announced that there was going to be a Doctor Who at 60 musical celebration concert coming up in the fall, and that's now been confirmed for Thursday, September 28th. 2023 at the Wales Millennium Centre in the afternoon, 2:30 in the afternoon. That's like at 5:30 in the morning for us that we have to. If
you know what the thing is, you don't have to watch it live, Stephen. I know you're going to, but you don't have to.
That's fun.
Or 7:30 for us, but yeah.
Is it 7:30? I was doing quick math there. I couldn't.
14:30 minus 7 is 7:30.
That's right. Oh, that's doable. I can do that.
Again, you don't have to watch it live.
I don't, but it's fun, Warren. It's fun to wait. Listen, I know people who woke up to watch Women's World Cup soccer because it was in Australia and New Zealand.
Like,
I know it's because it's soccer.
In this world of streaming, why is anybody doing anything live? Come on.
I actively only watch soccer to put me to sleep. So that'd be fun. Anyway, because Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat and Chris Chibnall are going to be there, as well as Murray Gold. And I don't know if Murray Gold will probably be there. Maybe Sagan Akinola, because they're going to do music from both composers from Modern Who, and then Mark Ayres and Peter Howell will be there too. But there'll also be, this is from the official thing, there will also be a look ahead to the keenly awaited Doctor Who 60th anniversary special. So there's going to be another publicity push, I think, around the end of September as well. So perhaps we'll know more. Perhaps we'll know when. I mean, I think they're only going to be looking ahead to the 60th anniversary. I don't think we'll know a proper release date for Ncuti Gatwa's first series until after, maybe even when Christmas drops. At this rate, unless they just.
Why crowd things out with that? Why confuse people? Possibly,
I could definitely see at the end of the Christmas special, Doctor Who will return in May. Or Doctor Who will return in April.
Spring.
Or in spring or something.
That will be the official confirmation. It'll be in spring. Exactly. Although you never know. I say that. I say you never know. But, Disney Plus is because of strikes. I don't know if you know this, but there's been a writer's strike and an actor's strike going on in the U.S. for quite some time now. Which
keyword U.S.
Yeah, which is quite obviously not affecting other parts of the world, given that Doctor Who is about to embark on a 10-month shoot. Or 8-month, I guess, at this point now. But so Disney Plus has moved around some of their shows because of strike. Now, some of these were done, but some of these have not been, or like we're waiting on
cut off halfway because of the strike. Yeah,
exactly. So for instance, What If was going to be earlier, I think, but now that's been kicked to Christmas. Loki's still on schedule for October 12th or something like that. I can't remember when, October 6th. And but like Echo, which is a spinoff from Hawkeye, which is a spinoff from Avengers, which is a spinoff from Iron Man.
Okay. Sure.
Was originally coming out November 29th. All episodes dropping, which is rare and awful. But now that's been bumped to January 2024. So X-Men, the animated one which they were doing was going to be fall 2023. The thing is,
that's past our time or after our time, but
right.
But it is beloved. Like there's a generation of millennials that loves that cartoon, so I can see why people would be disappointed about it. I personally don't care, but I was too old for it. So.
Right. Agatha, the WandaVision spinoff, which is a spinoff of the Avengers, which is a spinoff of anyway. That was originally going to be winter 2023, and now that's been pushed back to early fall, so just before Halloween, perhaps in keeping with the theme of the thing. So Disney Plus is sort of like saying we have to kick these things down the line because we need actors and stuff to promote them and everything. And because of this, they've canceled some, like the Spiderwick Chronicles was a thing they ordered, but they didn't have control of. Paramount was making that. Now they're free to shop that around. It's done. That's a done series. Nautilus.
It's based on books, right? I think
probably. Nautilus is another one which they're shooting in the Gold Coast in Australia that they had, but so that's also gone because they didn't own the IP to it. So when I saw those, I'm thinking, oh boy, they're gonna do this to Doctor Who too. I don't think they're gonna do it to Doctor Who, but
now this is in no way an endorsement of the studios because they are definitely in the wrong when it comes to this strike, what have you. And run by evil and dumb people. Yeah. But having said that, holistically speaking, is it such a bad thing that they spread this Marvel stuff out?
No.
Like, as opposed to saturating the market with it and annoying us all with, like, there's too much. Because honestly, there was a little too much Marvel happening. Like, there was just, and Star Wars too. Like, they were just like, let's throw everything at people. And I'm like, it's actually kind of counterproductive. It's maybe better to space the stuff out, regardless of a strike happening.
Yeah, it is. The upshot of this is, no, they're not clearing the decks expressly for Doctor Who, but there is probably less stuff premiering on Disney Plus now because of these strikes that Doctor Who won't have. Maybe Disney Plus will look at this, oh my God, new content, and we don't have to worry because it's made in the UK, so we don't have to worry about. I mean, it's not like they held back Ahsoka. That's still going on. As planned and stuff too. So it's not like they're dependent on these on people on strike to promote this stuff or anything like that. But I feel like Doctor Who will have a little more wider canvas to play. It'll basically be like season 17, where hey, ITV's on strike, so there's nothing else to watch but Doctor Who. So all right, we'll give it a shot. Why not? No else on. I was gonna watch the Agatha one about witches or something like that, but I guess I'll watch Doctor Who instead. I'm sure that's not what'll happen, but
I like how the average Disney Plus fan is apparently a slow-minded person who just kind of stares and talks at their TV and then decides to watch Doctor Who.
Yeah, well,
it's quite the caricature you've cooked up there.
After all, that's how it all started, Warren. No,
I never watched the original X-Men animated series, but I see here there's a follow-up animated series, X-Men 97, that got delayed.
That's the one. That's the one we were talking about.
But I also see here that I think the one I was looking forward to the most of all the stuff mentioned here is Daredevil: Born Again, which they haven't even wrapped the series yet, so that's good. It's been paused by the strikes.
Is that a spin-off?
They said 20 odd episodes, and I was like, no.
Oh,
yeah, it's a continuation of the Netflix series with
Charlie Cox.
Charlie Cox, that's
who's very good as Daredevil.
Sure.
Oh, he's very good. I mean, to put him in the Spider-Man film as well.
Is he?
And D'Onofrio's great as Kingpin too. So
build up, D'Onofrio is D'Onofrio. He's just amazing in anything he does.
Yeah, that's true.
He was in Full Metal Jacket.
Yes, he was. That's. I think that was where he got his first premiere.
Yeah, it was. I'm just.
And he was so amazing.
And
still one of my favorite films of all time, Full Metal Jacket.
It's good
Isn't
stuff.
He's the guy in Men in Black who's like, which is amazing acting as that alien thing. Like he does incredible. He makes it look effortless, which is a sign an actor is amazing. Like when they can just make something insane look effortless.
Warren's choking on his own rage here. It's just like he's just can't handle it.
I'm not even rad about anything. I'm praising Vincent D'Onofrio.
Choking on your own. Oh, never happened.
Yeah, he plays the main bug in Men in Black.
Yeah. And he's really good at that. So don't get canceled, Vincent D'Onofrio, after me saying nice things about you.
No, only the series that he'll be in will be canceled at this rate. Because of all this crazy strike stuff, which and like it's funny how some of these are. We're ready to go with Strange New Worlds season 3 just as long as the strikes end. We're just ready to go. It's almost like saying, if only these dumb unions would stop their strike, we could make more Star Trek for you.
It's not as if that's exactly what they.
No, but it feels very much like this sure is a nice season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds we got here. But
pity if anything happened.
Would be a shame if something happened to it. Yeah.
Political ploys.
Yeah, that's what's going on. That's why Warren and I are busy playing the early release of Starfield right now because
we sure are. Reading books, playing video games. Baldur's Gate comes out in the 6th. I'll be playing that on my PS5. Yeah. It's gonna be good.
Yeah, I've been watching Doctor Who. I'm in series 7B right now on my pilgrimage. I just watched Hyde last night. It was good. Apart from
that's excellent.
It's good stuff, but there were few little dogleg. I think it's not. Oh, another thing has happened. Okay. I know. I thought there was a couple like false endings in there and things. It was all right. The mood felt good. I'll say that. Oddly enough, because of my memory for dates, the episode takes place on November 25th, 1974, and I can't remember if I said this during the commentary, which we did like 10 years ago. But that is the day that Nick Drake died, and I thought, what an intriguing exact date to pick. November 25th, 1974.
Speaking of video games, I see more and more AI guys going, well, yes, I know, but we were talking about video games before that, right. So.
Gotcha. I know.
Anyway,
steering it back to Doctor Who. We are a Doctor Who podcast.
Well, I will eventually, but
talk about
AI guys
for 50 minutes, but anyway.
AI guys love to yell about how you're going to be able to put yourself in movies and do what you want. I'm like, we got that. It's video games. We don't need that in a movie because we already have that in a video game.
And don't forget fanfic.
Yeah, there you go.
That's
these are
solved problems.
Well, I mean, fanfic could pass as most actual official series now, but that's
including Doctor Who. Including Doctor Who.
A little bit. There's a bit of fanfic in Doctor Who. That's right. I know. I was watching Cold War last night as well. I watched 2 episodes last night. It's like, Mark Gatiss includes a reference to the Hads, which is mentioned in passing in the Crotons in 1968. It's thinking, didn't have to do that, but that's total fanfic right there because you can do that.
Of course it is.
Fan.
Well, I mean, just like in Astronaut 2-parter, the TARDIS turning invisible, which was like a brief thing in the invasion. Only ever happened once.
That's true. But they didn't actually refer to it by name like Gatiss did.
No, but I mean, that's still Moffat fanboying, fanboying, whatever.
A little bit, yeah. I know I've talked about this a lot, but I sometimes wonder about how more casual fans of Doctor Who feel about references. Here's the thing about, if you're a casual fan of Doctor Who and you think, I don't remember that reference to that. Occasionally, only really occasionally does Modern Who reference like stuff in passing. There's a lot of time where the Doctor says, oh, I was married to that person, I went to this person. That never happened in Classic Who either. So there's a lot of throwaway comments in Modern Who that has no bearing on Classic Who either. Whereas I feel if I watch like Ahsoka or something like that, it's like
or Strange New Worlds,
or Strange
the canon is out the window.
Literally everything is referencing something that I don't know about in a book here, and I think I feel kind of little out. But I don't think they do that very much in Doctor Who, which is kind of nice.
Until we get references to looms, and then
it's out the window, and then we're never doing this show again. Yeah. Also, it was Yasmin Finney's birthday recently, and the official Doctor Who social media account, which is to this date Twitter, they haven't moved to Blue Sky or Mastodon. I'm sorry, folks. They said, welcome to the Doctor Who family, Rose Noble. They actually officially confirmed the lineage of her character, Rose Noble, being the daughter of Donna Noble and Sean Temple, as played by Carl Collins at the end of time. So yeah, Rose Noble officially. We have suspected this for months that she is the daughter of Donna and Sean. But now it's official.
It's not really news.
No.
Number one, you say suspected when, people who were on, doing set reports and stuff at the time overheard dialogue calling her that.
Yeah.
And number two, why is she noble? Why not Temple? Like, how?
As I said, but to you off mic, F the patriarchy.
That's exactly. Why take the husband's name and everything in this? Why?
Rose Noble sounds cooler. Rose Temple is not a bad name, but Rose Noble's a better name. So
it does, yeah.
Also, if you're watching the show and you want to say to the audience, this is Donna's daughter, that's a pretty easy way to do it. So here they have the same name.
So you just say Donna's daughter.
Yeah, but this is the least complicated way to do it. This is the way to spoon feed it to the audience.
Why is she not the possession of the husband as is dictated by law and tradition, damn it?
Well, as Warren says, F the patriarchy. Fine, okay, that's a potentially cromulent explanation.
Sure.
But I mean, at the end of the day, that's usually
no.
But not how it works.
No, but here's
why not?
But here's the thing with TV. Nerds, and this is a very small example, but nerds, myself included, we overcomplicate the pudding. We always do. And the easiest way to convey this to an audience that doesn't care less and may not even remember who Donna is go, here's the daughter, Donna Noble, Rose Noble, and there's Donna Noble over there. So, it's sure you could do it a different way, but why complicate it?
Maybe
why bother?
Maybe she chose the name herself,
or that too. Yeah.
So there. Rose Noble. It's fine.
You're not wrong, Chris. It's just if I was RTD, I would go for the what's the word I'm looking for here? The easiest possible solution, the path of least resistance. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, exactly. You're making too much of this, Chris.
No, I disagree.
Well, here's what you do: you just refer to her as Rose Temple from now on, and stick to your damn guns.
Or Rose Temple Noble, if you want to be, or Rose Noble Temple. If you want to hyphenate it, if that's what she,
maybe
she doesn't want that. Maybe she didn't want that. Maybe the character of Rose says, I'm actually going to choose my mom's last name. So there. I know
See, that
people.
I can buy.
I know
That I
people.
can buy.
Well, we've seen a picture on Twitter. We haven't watched the episode yet. You were putting basically, why is this person called this? Having not seen the episode and knowing the
Damn
full
right.
backstory to this, I'm still going to make a fuss about this. Damn it!
To borrow your phrase,
Yep.
we're Doctor Who fans.
Well, okay, yeah, that's fair.
That's
is fair.
true. It's true.
And I'm sure I've come up with equally
Yeah.
determined, let's put it that way, takes that don't really bear out. So.
I know people. I know siblings who one of who has the name of one parent and one who has the name of the other parent. I know that in real life, not just Doctor Who. So
That is a rarity.
yeah. Well,
Nevertheless, based on
Is
this
it a
logic,
rarity?
K9 is now known as K9 Smith.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Sure.
I'm totally down with K9.
sure. Which could be John Smith or Sarah Jane Smith. Anyway, we're in September now. I should point that out, by the way, which means Doctor Who is in 2 months' time. So that's exciting because it's fun. It's fun at the 60th anniversary to have Doctor Who to watch. So that's kind of exciting. Also exciting, the Doctor Who Annual 2024 is coming out this week, September 7th. It's the which it seems odd because there's 2 doctors on the cover that we have yet to properly see, that being David Tennant's 14th Doctor and Ncuti Gatwa in a smarmy look in his leather coat look on the cover of it there, featuring an exclusive 14th Doctor story as well as a whole bunch of other stuff that you usually see in the annuals and things. So that's coming this damn week. You could pre-order it now, but it's just coming out this week. So they really shot that out really quick, because I remember we sort of stumbled on an image or something last week. I thought, oh, let's wait a few months for the official release. No, it's happening like 2 days later. So there it is.
Better be like a Ncuti Gatwa Leather Daddy comic in there.
I don't think there's going to be anything, because they don't want his first story to be in a comic. Probably they did that with the 14th, because that was in Doctor Who magazine. But anyway.
That was quite an incredible shift there, Chris, from very traditionalist, it has to be Rose Temple, to I need Leather Daddy, Ncuti Gatwa. I'm just I'm hither and yon. What's going on here?
Getting whiplash in the journey there, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Don't we all need Leather Daddy Ncuti Gatwa?
I never said we didn't. I'm just saying I'm getting whiplash.
Yeah. This has been in the works for quite a while, but now the official release has happened. Magic the Gathering Doctor Who is coming out October 13th. I know nothing of Magic the Gathering.
Say goodbye to your wallet.
Well, thankfully, I don't collect very many things either when it comes to anything other than Lego, which I'm also pretty kind of curtailing anyway because of space. But Warren, do tell us about Magic the Gathering here.
Chris may actually know more about this than I do.
Okay.
But, as far as I know, and Magic the Gatheringists, please don't get mad at me, but from what I gather, I never played it because it was expensive. But it's basically D&D-esque, not D&D, D&D-esque combat in card form. Like you boil down all the card battles or the battles in those games into card form, and there's a bunch of different ones like this. Just looking at it, the art looks great. I have to say, the art looks fantastic on all the different, like the one of Missy with the Dalek and the Cyberman, and the Tenant one is pretty good. Like, just go to the site and check them out. Me describing it's not going to help, but the art looks great, and that's kind of part why people do it. But this and Warhammer are the 2 most expensive ways to throw your money away to game.
Right.
Says the guy playing Starfield who paid $40 extra to get it a few days early. So who the hell am I to talk? But.
Yeah. There's a few packs, timey-wimey, Masters of Evil, like different packs of cards and stuff like that.
That's how they get you. It's going to be a few. This is the Lego Dimensions of cards.
Yes, basically. I was about to make that. It's like Toys to Life or something is what that whole line of things that Lego Dimensions was part of, and now it's kind of gone.
Except this has been a huge success for like 30-odd years, and not like Lego Dimensions. So,
and now it's Doctor Who. So,
sorry, Chris, you were going to say?
No, all I know is like there's like commander decks and booster decks and packs and
and I don't understand it myself. So.
I've never played it, but I have had conversations with coworkers who know nothing about Doctor Who, but know about Magic, and they know that Magic is having this Doctor Who thing, so they're asking me about crossover like stuff, and I have no idea what the Magic side of that, but. My main complaint about all this, because I gotta complain, is a lot of Google alerts come out for Magic stuff for Doctor Who. Right. So there's a lot of times that it's abbreviated as MTG, and I think something completely different than Magic the Gathering.
That's a legit complaint.
When I see those Google alerts hit.
There's an awful woman who has those
Same
initials.
3 letters.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, Magic the Gathering, October 13th. So yeah, with potential more stuff, more trailers, maybe another trailer perhaps on September 28th when the concert, and now this, and I imagine the Fortnite thing, which has been rumored for quite a while, might be happening at some point, although they might wait until Ncuti Gatwa was
pushed
actually
back or something.
It was pushed back maybe to January, actually, now that I think about it, and they might be waiting for Ncuti Gatwa to actually be Doctor Who for that. I'm just thinking how long David Tennant has been able to not milk as such, but like he's kind of the current face of Doctor Who. With Ncuti Gatwa there, we don't want to show too much of it. Here is what he looks like, but we don't want to actually introduce him yet because we don't want to spoil his reveal. But like you turn on the official Doctor Who YouTube channel, there's David Tennant as the 14th Doctor. It's like how I wonder what the amount of time on screen to the amount of time that he's been the official person to say, don't forget to subscribe to the Doctor Who YouTube channel, because that's really the most important thing there. They should have that on his Wikipedia page. He said this, the YouTube channel from October 23rd, 2022, or till November. Like it'll be 13 months he'll have been the current Doctor, and he'll have only been on for like
But
3
but
episodes.
even though he's getting very little screen time and he's the current Doctor and a new Doctor, they may deny this, but a lot of it is kind of coasting on the fact that he was also the 10th Doctor. So I mean, there's a bit of that for sure.
Yeah.
Also, Ncuti Gatwa, we've gotten more of him than we ever got of Jodie Whittaker, even though he's not even the Doctor yet.
Oh, it's amazing. He's been everywhere. It was in LUK this past week with a whole bunch of photo shoots and everything. Yeah, he's just he's gonna be all over the press. You're gonna be sick of it. We're not gonna be sick of Ncuti Gatwa. It's great.
No, of course not.
I mean, so this month is when Sex Education Series 3 comes out, isn't it?
Series 4.
4?
Yeah, the last one.
The final one, whichever version, whichever series it is. So, I mean, he's also going to be, I don't know, I would only probably ever peripherally see Sex Education promo stuff, but I'm sure there's, no shortage of that side of his career having, articles about him everywhere.
True. Yeah. That's true too. So there's things coming out that he can talk about. Let's face it, since he's not really part of the SAG, Screen Actors Guild, he's probably allowed to do these things in the UK. To say, I'll talk about that because I can, whereas other places can't because of the strike and all that. So he might be a marketable quality to promote things that are coming out because he's allowed to talk about them, unlike other things. So. Anyway, also coming in March of next year, March 7th, the 2024, the Doctor Who audio annual is coming out. Doctor Who, the Phaser Aliens and Other Stories, which is a whole bunch of actual stuff were published in book form from 1965 through to 84. But these are now being read as new recordings by people like Maureen O'Brien and Annika Wills and Tim Treloar and Mina Anwar and Jeffrey Beavers and Dan Starkey are all reading stories for this audio annual. It's coming out. It's from BBC Audio.
I'm glad to see Maureen O'Brien in that list.
Yeah. Were you going to say that one?
I was just going to say, I don't know why the Phaser Aliens makes me laugh, but it does. I'm not sure. It's just boiling it down to its essence. There's phasers and aliens. The end.
That's true. I want to point out that the readings were produced by Neil Gardner. So that's the third different Gardner we've been. So I don't know if Neil Gardner is a relation to Jessica Gardner or Julie Gardner. So there's a lot of Gardners going on. Or indeed, former Penguins and Maple Leafs forward from the early 1980s, Paul Gardner. I don't know if they're related to him as well. So I only know him from hockey cards. That's all. So there you go. All right. Anything else? We're going to move on to some Big Finish stuff. Anything else you want to mention there? No. Do you want to talk about Magic Gathering or annuals? Or...
Nope. I've said everything I can possibly say that I probably got wrong about Magic the Gathering.
Okay. Well, there's some big Finish stuff coming. We there's a new thing out now. We usually announce them when they're released, but not really when they come out. But Doctor Who Purity Unbound features another arc closing from Big Finish. This one's Hebe, is played by Ruth Medley, who's going to be in the TV series. At least certainly at least one of the David Tennant specials. She's in the trailer and stuff like that. they're closing arcs in Big Finish in advance of the 60th anniversary, and they're actually like sort of like doing these ... Another arc is closing. So I don't know if this is leading to something when it comes to Big Finish. They're tying up some loose ends, it looks like, when it comes to Big Finish stuff. I don't know anything about what's coming down the pipe. Or what the deal is, but I do know that this Once and Future thing, which is sort of the building up to the 60th anniversary, wraps up in October as well, with a coda way off in May of 2024, which is intriguing. Why they would wait so long for a coda and have it planned to be released as such. But yeah, I'm interested in seeing what Big Finish's relationship is with the incoming production team, and what that means for the future of Big Finish, and what kind of stories they'll tell. So anyway, that's just a sign of interesting things ahead. Also coming out. Yes, go ahead, Chris.
Just before we move on,
yeah.
To tie it in, Shirley Houston's also in that one. Partner of Toby Hadoke.
That's right, and
cool.
she's also in the Quatermass live reading coming up this Saturday as well. So that's kind of cool. Also from Big Finish, Torch of Dog Hop.
I love this because it's basically just like, we got Andy some dogs. What the hell?
Yeah, why not?
Here you go. Yeah. Just here's a day in the life with some dog babysitting or something.
Yeah, Tom Price stars in this as PC Andy with dogs. So if you like dogs, I like dogs.
I mean, there's this Rottweiler or whatever it is, is gnarly and drooling or whatever, and then there's this tiny little lapdog on his shoulder. Just just a neat little dichotomy.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
It's cute.
Cool cover. And Paul McGann's doctor. You remember Paul McGann? He was Doctor. He was at Hooverville at that happened today as we record this on Saturday this weekend up in Derby. Paul McGann as the Big Finish press release. He's getting around a lot too. ... So Paul McGann's all over the place, but he's starring in a Paternoster Gang Rogues Gallery, which is coming out in October. Which is interesting. I know.
Or a coincidence.
Possibly a coincidence. Who knows? Big Finish. Last we'll talk about some conventions. Chicago TARDIS is coming up on Thanksgiving weekend, as it always does, which coincides directly with the 60th anniversary. They announced Carole Ann Ford, the very first companion, of course, by Susan Foreman in the first series of Doctor Who. She has been announced as a guest, who joins Colin Baker, Lisa Bowerman, Jonathan Carley, Peter Davison, Jason Haig, Ellery, Fraser Hines, Sylvester McCoy, Stacey Smith, and Michael Troughton, all coming up at Chicago TARDIS in November. Even though they've reinstated flights to Minneapolis from Edmonton, which makes Chicago TARDIS a little more achievable. Like, they canceled it for a couple of years there, and he had to fly to like Toronto or Denver, and it was just like, this is going to take a day just to get a 3-hour flight to Chicago. I didn't go. I don't think I'll go this year either, because it coincides with the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who, and I feel like there might be a lot of Doctor Who to watch and cover on the podcast. Here's hoping. But so that's when we'll be going. But anyway, that's what's happening. So Chicago TARDIS happening. Anyway, that's it for the news, folks. We shift gears now and bring on Toby Hadoke, who renowned Doctor Who person, of course, Toby Hadoke, but his other big interest in life is Quatermass. So enjoy our conversation about Quatermass. Doctor Who is celebrating its 60th anniversary this year, but another influential BBC science fiction franchise is celebrating its own milestone, that being its 70th anniversary. It is, of course, Quatermass, and my guest has written an upcoming book about it, appeared all over the 2018 Blu-ray release of Quatermass in the Pit, and will be part of the cast performing a live reading of the original Quatermass experiment, broadcast from Alexandra Palace on Saturday, September 9th. It's Toby Hadoke. Hello, Toby.
Hello, Stephen. What a delight to be convening with you over cyberspace once again.
I know. I often try to concoct reasons or excuses to have you on at least once a year, just so we can have a chat about stuff. But so it's nice that you keep busy enough that we have tangible items and events to talk about, and not just banter for 45 minutes. So well done on fulfilling your end of the bargain by doing this Quatermass thing.
Oh, well, it's really exciting, and it's the sort of thing that I used to sort of dream of doing when I was a kid, and but never really thought that there would be a version. I mean, it's a very compromised version. It's just reading from the script, but it's got Mark Gatiss in it, and I'm playing a really nice part in it. And my sort of 15, 16, 17-year-old self who discovered Quatermass, fantasized about such things, but I don't think I ever thought would really happen. So it's follow your dreams, everybody. If you build it, it will come.
For the uninitiated, though, Toby, can you explain what Quatermass is and how it became to be sort of this icon of British television in the early days?
Well, I first encountered it because it was spoken of in hallowed tones in my house. My house wasn't necessarily a science fiction household, although my older brothers liked Doctor Who, and my Doctor Who love was sort of was
tolerated.
Certainly was tolerated. But Quatermass, you'd occasionally see Quatermass in the Pit, the film, on sort of TV listings, but it wouldn't be on till like 11 o'clock. So I wouldn't be watching that. And we had an A to Z of monsters that had Daleks, Cybermen, and Ice Warriors in. Really nice pictures from some old Doctor Who's. Lots of Universal horror pictures in there as well. But it also had Quatermass, and it said, "Oh, but this isn't a monster, but he was a scientist who investigated monsters," and it had this kind of legendary quality of it was sci-fi BW before Who, and because I remember my mum talking about it, so it was a thing that adults talked of, but not as kind of the stuff that they watched as kids. It was the stuff that had a sort of hallowed quality about it, as I say, and I never thought I'd sort of ever watch it, but I knew of it as this thing that had a certain luster and a certain it was talked of as a sort of high quality thing. It wasn't a children's program. It was adult. It was proper science fiction. It was proper television. But it also had this thing of being, it was old. Doctor Who was old, and this was before old Doctor Who. Mm-hmm. This was ancient. This was cobwebby. But I couldn't even quite imagine what it was like. All I'd seen was the picture of the Martians from the Quatermass and the Pit, the TV version, and it was. It was exactly 10 years before Doctor Who. The July the 18th, 1953, the first episode of the Quatermass experiment was broadcast, and it was the brainchild of a Manx writer called Nigel Neal, who famously always refused to write for Doctor Who and thought it was rubbish. Mm-hmm. And Doctor Who fans have sort of taken against him for that. The more you learn about Doctor Who, he thought about Nigel Neal, he thought everything was rubbish. It wasn't just Doctor Who. So don't take it personally, Doctor Who fans. He was pretty grumpy about a lot of things. And he didn't consider himself a science fiction writer. In fact, the Quatermass experiment has a sort of spoof of American sci-fi films in it, and it's one of the first ideas he had when he was writing the thing. And there are sort of comedy characters, as there are in a lot of 50s dramas. There are sort of, core blimey cockneys and all of that, but there's even those in Orwell, And he did 3 serials, 1953, 1955, 1958. And the really interesting thing about them is that television is evolving so quickly during that decade that the first one, the Quatermass experiment, is done at Alexandra Palace on these massive, clunky cameras that it's very difficult to line up, and they're really difficult to manipulate, and the lenses have to be done by hand, and the picture quality is terrible. And indeed, they only recorded the first 2 episodes because when they were recording the second from a big monitor in a room in Alexandra, not a big monitor, a very small monitor in a room in Alexandra Palace, a fly landed on either on the camera or the monitor and was captured. And so the recording, which had been done for you lot actually, Stephen, because 16mm prints were sent to the Canadian Broadcasting Company, and it was even scheduled to be shown in Canada, but when they discontinued recording on technical grounds after episode 2, Canada had to quickly decide to show something else, even though it is listed on some for Canadian broadcast, but seems that it never was. But then Quatermass 2, they were all live, by the way. All the studio stuff in all of them is live. Quatermass Experiment is 95% live. Quatermass 2, only a couple of years later, has extensive location filming at a Shellhaven factory in Essex, big gasworks. So that shows television sort of going, well, let's go outside, and they film it they shoot it beautifully. Rudolf Cartier, who produced and directed them all, was an Austrian emigre who had a very cinematic sort of background and view. So he as well as Nigel Neal bringing interesting writing to television. The producer was Rudolf Cartier, who was bringing a sort of cinematic view to a medium that was seen largely as radio with pictures in the 1950s. Television was a sort of almost a dirty word. And then in 1958-59, they do Quatermass in the Pit, which has film work at actually in the studios mostly, a little bit of location, but in terms of its ideas and in terms of its staging and in terms of its prestige within the BBC is a major production of 1950s television, and is one of the greatest pieces of science fiction or even television ever made. And their influence on future science fiction and indeed Doctor Who is massive. But they weren't cult pieces. They weren't, they weren't B-movie-esque. They were proper, serious adult drama with serious themes, serious ideas, and also a serious intent in their staging and their realization to kick television into shape a little bit and to stop it from being filmed theatre. I mean, it had the hangover of that. The last episode of Quatermass Experiment, I found evidence that the cast still took a bow at the end of the performance of episode 6.
Oh, wow.
That shows you how firmly the theatrical roots were sort of established under Alexandra Palace, even as they were making sort of television history. And quite often television, was excerpts from plays that were on at the West End at that time. It was more, or adaptations of classics or theatrical works being turned into television. So again, Nigel Neal was bringing a sort of modern sensibility to create original drama, and he just happened to do it with science fiction. And science fiction, of course, reflects the times, and so they had a great impact on the viewer at home, because also they weren't particularly used to high-end science fiction either. And they famously gripped the nation. They emptied the pubs. There were very few televisions, and maybe people would go to the house of the one person in the street who had a television, and particularly to crowd round and watch the latest instalment of Quatermass. Or Quatermass, as they, and indeed even you, have been known to call it.
I have at one time in my life, at least once, called it that. Well, I mean, we had Paul Hayes on the show, whose excellent book, Pulled Open, sort of explores the run-up to the making of Doctor Who in the early 1960s. And in the book, where it sort of mentioned about how the BBC sort of sought out the live theater presentation was a much more palatable and prestigious art form than sort of the tawdry filmed stuff that they would get from the US. I think there was the famous thing about, we'd rather make A plays instead of B movies sort of thing. I mean, the way that Quatermass Experiment was sort of portrayed like that, even though there was, as you say, a lot of filmed elements in Quatermass in the Pit, did this sort of help establish that sort of prestige, or was it sort of riding on the way that this is how prestigious television was made in those days?
Well, I mean, having sort of looked through all the newspaper coverage at the time, Rudolf Cartier, the producer, becomes a well-known name in the way that sort of television directors really aren't these days. But, the next Cartier production was talked about, and he was the sort of headline news because he was experimenting. He was always pushing the boundaries. I mean, pushing the boundaries is something of a euphemism for being told he couldn't spend any more money and doing it anyway. And of course, he and Nigel Neal didn't just do Quatermass. They did, and probably at the time, more importantly, in a way, was their production of 1984, which brought a big literary masterpiece to the screen, but also was hugely controversial and got people writing into the BBC, accusing them of all not just being frightening or near the knuckle, but of being immoral and disgusting. And indeed, Cartier had to have bodyguards for because in those days of the plays, they didn't show 1984. On the first day, and then repeat and record it, and then play the repeat. They did it on one day, and then 4 days later they did it again, and that was the one that they recorded. So you have, it was what we're seeing is the performance that went out, which is extraordinary. So they consciously wanted to push the boundaries, and they were viewed with a bit of suspicion from some people within the BBC. As I say, that radio with pictures thing was and a lot of actors didn't want to work in television because they saw it as beneath them. Then they realised it paid a hell of a lot more than theatre, and people started to migrate fairly quickly. But it was looked down upon. It was viewed with a certain amount of disdain, and they didn't necessarily have a sort of visual ambition for it, as you've sort of taken from what Paul said in his book.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the idea that it was a sort of, that the camera was part of the medium rather than just something to transmit, you know, a piece of theatre in as uncomplicated a fashion as possible was there was a real sort of push and pull of that sort of thing going on in the 50s, and you know, funnily enough, the popular science fiction kind of won and kind of showed the way.
It did. It's, you know, I have yet to watch the two existing episodes of Quatermass Conspiracy. I haven't seen Quatermass 2 either, which seems to be the one not as many people talk about. But in Quatermass a bit, I own the Blu-ray of it. It was fascinating to see how much pre-filmed stuff there was. I stayed so pure that I didn't read up on anything, and only after did I realize that was live as well. I knew the first two were live. I didn't know they actually did the third one live too. But so impressive was the production, and perhaps so used to 1960s Doctor Who that I was that I could believe that it wasn't live. But what was it? And was it unique to have that much pre-filmed material in there? I'm thinking of the budgets of Doctor Who in the early 1960s, where they would have to fight and scrap for a minute worth of footage from Ealing or something in one episode.
But these were prestigious productions, you see. So I mean, but actually, I mean, you would be shocked if you watched Quatermass Experiment and Quatermass 2, the gulf in quality between the three of them. I mean, the Quatermass Experiment is remarkable in many ways, but it looks pretty shonky by today's standards. Mm-hmm. And it has virtually no pre-filming, and there is some in later episodes, but we can't see those. And in fact, one of the major pre-film sequences in episode 4, I think it is, or is it 5? Doesn't matter. One of the episodes, I think it's 4, the episode actually overran. And the program on before it had overrun, so they got a phone call in the box saying, you're going to have to drop something because we need to get back on time. And so one of the filmed sequences in that episode of the Quatermass Experiment, they didn't actually use to bring the episode back in on time. So they actually filmed this. That's how close to the wire it was. They're in the box going, right, we're 5 minutes over. What can we lose? Well, we can just not play that film sequence in and get us back on track. And the technical quality, I mean, Pitt looks remarkable, especially as they kept the negatives of most of the film sequences, so they look like they were made yesterday. But you know, it's a different ball game to Doctor Who. It's not a serial. It's a series. They're each 6-part series, and you know the episodes are budgeted, you know, like a high end play, and also because Cartier just signs off to pay for everything and gets into trouble, but just does it anyway. But they were conceived as Quatermass and the Pit, particularly because of the success of the first two, was conceived as a prestige production. Whereas with the Quatermass Experiment, they just pushed the boundaries, and Quatermass 2 is sort of sandwiched somewhere in between. But no, I think it is a culture shock if you're used to watching 60s Doctor Who. The resources that are available to Quatermass and the boundaries that are being pushed, they are at a sort of a higher end, really.
We've mentioned Doctor Who a few times, and you've mentioned how Quatermass either consciously or subconsciously influenced Doctor Who. In what ways do you think Quatermass influenced the Doctor Who, and especially in, I want to say, probably the early 1970s is probably when those influences show up the most?
Yeah, well, I mean, season 7 is very much has a Quatermass vibe, where it's quite serious, where it's got, you know, gritty. It's all relative, but gritty as Doctor Who can be, and slightly fewer fantastical elements, and you know that template of Doctor Who of, you know, the eccentric professor, although Quatermass isn't too eccentric, but the professor figure, you know, with military backing. is very much Quatermass and the Pit. In Quatermass and the Pit, Professor Quatermass is helping a bomb disposal squad, get to the bottom of a mysterious object, and that's very like any, the vibe of the feel of it is very like any sort of 70s story, really. But I mean, what Nigel Kneale does with Quatermass is he tells the three sort of basic sci-fi stories. The Quatermass Experiment is about a rocket ship that goes into space with three men on board, and it comes back and only one of them remains, and he starts changing into something. So it's the infected astronaut, the alien possessing someone in order to take over the Earth. It's very clever. They do it very scientifically. That it suggests that it's using his body as a way of acclimatizing to our planet, and then when it has, it spreads like a fungus, and it's going to spread its spores and make life impossible for humanity. But it's got a bit of Frankenstein's monster in it as well, because the astronaut is stricken, and he has elements of his humanity and indeed the humanity of his two colleagues. He is actually a vessel of a human amalgam of all three of the astronauts that went up, and just one came back, but he has the combined knowledge and intelligence and indeed humanity of all three, and it is that humanity that Quatermass appeals to. So it's almost sort of appeals to the soul almost. So it's quite it's very thoughtful in that way. But how that inspires Doctor Who is that the infected astronaut thing, the end of part 2 of The Ark in Space could easily be from Quatermass. Quatermass 2 is the sort of paranoid conspiracy thriller, having with the Quatermass Experiment that the alien has come to Earth to find out what's going on. We learn actually in Quatermass 2 that this invasion has been going on for a year, and the aliens are already established and have reached the upper echelons of government. So it's one of those Doctor Who stories where it's a race against time because the plan is underway, and it affects it's very X-Filesy and any the invaders and any number of those sorts of stories that you can imagine. And then Quatermass and the Pit, I mean, you can see it word for word in things like Image of the Fendal with the skull with the pentacle on it, in the Demons, where we've got ancient alien monsters all with horns who look like the devil, because Quatermass and the Pit is about how our ancient myths and folklore were actually inspired by aliens who were here long before we were, and the wheeze is they were experimenting on us to keep their species and their culture going by proxy because their world was dying out. They just happened to be Martians. Mars is the god of war, and just after World War II, our warlike tendencies are very much under the microscope and cause of great concern. And Kneale goes, well, what if our warlike tendencies were created by insects who like conformity? So that's where Aryan supremacy and all that sort of thing, and ridding a species of mutations. Imperfects are rejected, says Nyder in Genesis of the Daleks, in a very Martian-y kind / Nazi kind of way. That's all in there, but he ties it in with folklore as well, and looks and so brilliantly has the tropes of horror to tell his science fiction story, because laser guns and silver hats aren't too frightening. Cobwebs, gargoyles, mystery, shadows, the ancient, the long dead, the haunting, they're all really scary. So he very much picks the best ways of telling his story. And Quatermass in the Pit is extraordinary. But yeah, that's in loads of Doctor Who stories that sort of combine horror and sci-fi and have ancient alien menace within them. And not just Doctor Who, other series too.
Yeah, I found it fascinating that, if future, drama, science fiction stuff, including Doctor Who, would sort of like look back at, aliens created the pyramids, or like all that's great in humanity was established by aliens or something like that, as a bit of a throwaway and a joke. And it's actually the worst base impulses of humanity that was inspired by aliens in Quatermass and the Pit, which I found fascinating.
Yes, and I think it's quite adult in that way. So, because often science fiction says, these people are a bit like Nazis, and Nazis are bad. What Kneale does is he goes, we kind of all have the potential to be Nazis, and that is inbuilt within us, and it's civilization, intellectualizing its way out of that, and using intelligence and humanity to take us away from those base instincts that are, that exist within us because we are in real life we are animals, but in science fiction life we are aliens. That is, I think, a braver thing to do, to not say, oh, those people are Nazis and they're bad, to say we, without cultivating ourselves correctly, could be the Nazis. And this is why we have to be very, very careful of that instinct within us that always seems to have us fighting those that are different or not like ourselves, or do not conform to our image of what we should be like, and it very much shines the light on ourselves, which I think is brave and clever. And I mean, it's an extremely clever script, Quatermass in the Pit. Not a word is wasted. The subtext is so sort of rigorous and intelligent, but told with these brilliant deft touches of scares and set pieces and moments and bits of sheer terror. It's really very well done.
Yeah, one of the most chilling sequences. I mean, there's 2 or 3 chilling sequences that will make you think when you're watching, the Governor Lobos in episode 2 of the Space Museum moan on about his job, that actor had actually about 6 years prior been part of some of the most chilling scenes in Doctor Who. I'm talking about Richard Shaw running through the street,
and he's
it's terrifying,
magnificent. Yeah, he's magnificent. It is a truly superb performance. He was the first actor I ever wrote to, because I think his performance as Richard Shaw, as he's Governor Lobos, he's also in Frontier in Space, and he has a bucket on his head in Underworld. He's in all sorts. He's in A Night to Remember. He's in all 60s and 70s telly. What a career! But his finest hour has got to be as Sladen the Workman in Quatermass in the Pit, and he's magnificent. It's a truly modern performance. He gets how to do the sci-fi stuff without it being silly. He's truly terrified, but also because he's genuine and earthy and working class. It doesn't have that sort of in fact, he was one of the few actors in Quatermass in the Pit who'd had no stage experience whatsoever. He was a purely television and film actor, and I think that grounds it in a sort of realism that starts to take it out of the 50s and into the 60s, and the realism of the sort of Joan Littlewood kind of actors you've got with George Sewell and Glyn Houston and those people who are cut from a more sort of earthy mould. And I think Richard Shaw is fantastic. And also the fact that I wrote to him and he wrote me a lovely letter back means that he created the monster you can hear talking to you now. Because if he hadn't written such a lovely letter back, who knows, I might never have written to another actor and might have returned to my little cupboard in Shropshire and never emerged again.
We would have all been worse for it, Toby. Before I mean, you love actors, and there are lots of great acting performances in this, and all across all 3. There are 3 different Quatermasses, mostly by necessity. Why did they have so many different recastings of the lead character?
Well, the first Quatermass was Reginald Tate, who was a very highly regarded television actor at the time, although actually they did toy with casting Andre Morel. And for a moment, it's very difficult to rationalise all the paperwork, but for a moment Tate is cast, and then it seems he steps aside because Andre Morel was, a bigger name, for Andre Morel, who then decides not to do the Quatermass experiment, and Tate is back in. And Tate is excellent. Tate gives a very modern performance from what we can see from the first 2 episodes. You can see why he did well on television. He's actually a very subtle and sort of direct and vital actor, but he sadly and he was a very hard worker. He didn't half graft. I found out a lot about it. There's a very exhaustive chapter on him in the first volume of the book, and seems to have been a really really committed guy. And he sadly died of a heart attack in the August before the filming at the end of September, I think, of Quatermass and the 2. So one of the great myths of Quatermass, and I still see it perpetuated to this day on Facebook groups and in people's writings, is that the second Quatermass, John Robinson, was cast so late in the day he doesn't know his lines in episode 1. He was cast at the same time that Tate would have been cast. Tate had not been cast. Tate had not seen scripts for Quatermass 2. He'd agreed to do it, but they weren't really in pre-production, and John Robinson does all the pre-filming for Quatermass 2 a month before he's in the studio doing episode 1. So all those people go, oh yeah, I can tell he doesn't know his lines in episode 1. Well, I'm afraid that's transference of loving a lovely, hoary old mythy story and going, oh yeah, you can see it, because it sounds much better to go, this guy was thrust in at the last minute and doesn't know what he's doing. Mm. It is fair to say, I think, that John Robinson was nobody's choice, and that by the time Tate died, loads of actors were either booked up or on holiday. I mean, Rudolph Cartier used Robinson quite a lot afterwards, so there was certainly no issue between director and actor. Nigel Neal wasn't happy with John Robinson at all at the time, and Robinson struggled, I think, with the technical dialogue, and he's a very stoical actor. He plays Quatermass as though he's got sort of indigestion, so he looks slightly pained for the whole thing. And I actually quite like his performance, because I kind of like stoical 1950s kind of acting, but he doesn't have the range of and the sort of vitality of Tate, and he doesn't have the charisma and the sort of debonair flair of Andre Morel, who comes later, and so there was no way Robinson was going to be Quatermass again, even though, as I say, he worked with Cartier many times afterwards, and actually directly afterwards playing second lead in a play written by Nigel Neal's wife and starring Marius Goring. So there's a history has reported Robinson's entrance to Quatermass and exit from it rather inaccurately, and I'm looking forward to redressing the balance there for poor old John Robinson in the books. Mm-hmm. And then Andre Morel comes in, who, as I say, had been considered, was a highly regarded theatre actor whose career had been slightly knocked aside by the war, and some of the momentum he was gaining in the theatre was scuppered by that, and had turned to television and didn't have the sort of snobbish view towards television that some did, and he had a gift for underplaying that made him very good on the small screen, and he liked the money that television paid. And so by 1958, he's already worked for Cartier and Neal. He's O'Brien in the 1984, and a very commanding performance that is. But his Quatermass is much more in the mould of the sort of John Pertwee Doctor. He's slightly eccentric, and he's quite debonair, and he's charismatic, and he's there to be a different character from the very icy cold militaristic Colonel Breen, played by Anthony Bushell, who is seen to represent the intransigence of the military. So you need a Quatermass who's not such a ministry man, who doesn't quite fit in the House of Commons or sitting in a table with the top brass of the military. And Morel brings all of that with him, and was my first Quatermass, because I saw Quatermass in the Pit first, mm-hmm. and I think is fabulous, but I can understand those who may see it straying slightly from the original sort of concept of the character, who is a sort of wretched fellow. We discover, without it being laboured, that his wife is long dead. In Quatermass 2, he has a daughter, and her great tragedy is that she's a terrible actress, and he sends his mates up into space, and they all die horribly. He in Quatermass Experiment, he creates a moon base to house us on the moon and to enable us to live in an alien environment, and the government, which has been taken over by it, actually uses that to house aliens on Earth. So he is the builder of the tools that the aliens use to propagate themselves on our planet. So he's quite unlucky. He's quite wretched. He is that permanent sort of paradox of wayfaring science in that you have to take risks to make progress, but when you're making progress, if you make a mistake, you can unleash hell. And Quatermass is a pioneer whose pioneering work kills his friends and threatens the Earth, and it's that uneasy relationship that the serials have with science. They're all about science and about breaking new frontiers, but they're horrid warnings for what can happen if it all goes wrong, and the perversion of science. And poor old Quatermass, lives on the axis of that, and he's got one foot in saving the world and one foot in being responsible for its destruction. And as a result, he's a at his best, he's a rather unfortunate and wretched and sort of almost tragic character.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned this just to say how long it's been in gestation, and not to say that you've been slacking or anything, but in episode 1, the commentary on the 2018 Blu-ray of Quatermass in the Pit, you say how about you're writing a book on Quatermass, and it's now 2023, and it's nearing the end of its production cycle. But it's been
my friend,
this book that you've been writing has been in the works for a while. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, I wrote to Richard Shaw in April 1989. So I started writing to actors, principally, actors from Quatermass. When the Quatermass serials were old and fusty, and most people involved were probably dead, thought I, Mm-hmm. And certainly, the scant research I could do at the time, which was going to libraries and looking up the main actors, the 3 Quatermasses were dead and long dead, and a lot of the actors I knew from them, the ones who were slightly well-known, like Wilfrid Bramble and Rupert Davis, and the faces that you see pop up, were all dead. So, and there was no internet, there was no internet movie database, there was no, so I basically had to watch to see if an old person appeared on television and read the credits, and if it was the name of somebody being Quatermass, I'd write to them, care of Equity or their agent, and strike gold. And sometimes, mostly they replied, some didn't, but I got a good sort of roster of performers, and then I sort of branched out and wrote to Jack Kine and Bernard Wilkie of the BBC Visual Effects Department, and then Rudolph Cartier, who I believed long dead, just because I'd never really heard of him. I was looking in Who's Who, because I noticed that Who's Who in the library had people's addresses, and so I was flicking through for Peter Cushing, because I thought, well, I can write to him about 1984. And as I was looking for Cushing, I found Cartier, and it had his address. So I wrote to him. So I corresponded with Cartier and even spoke to him on the phone. And so branched out. So I was writing to all of these people in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, and had this view to writing a book. I didn't really know what that involved, and if I had written it at the time, it would have probably had biographies of the key characters, and have been fairly anodyne. And I worked quite hard on it, and then I sort of but then I sent off to various publishers, and there was kind of there's not really a market for this. And I'd got this sort of storehouse of stuff, and I'd got photos from the designer, Clifford Hatts, designer of Quatermass of the Pit, who gave me all of his photographs and some of his, set drawings and that sort of thing. So it was always sort of bubbling away. And then I gave much of what I had to the DVD release, and was slightly wounded by the 2 things I asked for, which was that they asked Clifford Hatts for permission to use his photos, and they credit me. They didn't do either of those things, and I was a bit disappointed by that. So that left a kind of that made me sort of step away from it for a bit, and it was sort of a little bit tainted. So I sort of stepped away, but always had it in my head to do this. And then I mentioned to Matt West that I'd got all this stuff, and he had a publishing house, Milk Publishing, and he very kindly offered to publish it, but very foolishly said, I don't believe in giving writers deadlines. So then I could just tell everybody I was writing a book without actually doing anything. What I did do then was I wrote to a few people, now that there was an internet, and the few people that were still alive that I hadn't contacted or whatever, and wrote to them, and so mopped up a few interviews that I hadn't done, and found a few things. And then I had some personal things which took me away from doing anything really, but it's all happened for a reason, Stephen, because even when we were doing the Quatermass and the Pit Blu-ray, I gave them all the photos I'd found from Quatermass and the Pit, which I really, part of me was going, keep those for the book, keep them as an exclusive, because I kind of found a load more stuff, but I was rewarded in heaven because I gave those exclusive photos and have since discovered even more. And I've also, since then, I've adapted The Road for Radio 4, and so was able to meet Nigel Neal's widow, Judith Kerr, and she took me to the house, and I interviewed her for a whole day, and I touched the monster from the Quatermass experiment, and as a result of that, when she died, I knew her agent, so her agent put me in touch with Nigel Neal's kids, Tacey and Matthew, and they've been really cooperative, and so I've got it's now an official book rather than an unofficial guide to or whatever. And then Stuart Manning came on board to publish it, and I was a bit worried about the word count. And then we started working on this live Quatermass, and I said it'd be nice to get the book out in time for the live one, but it's over long at the moment. And he said, well, actually, why don't you break it up? It was already broken up into 2 volumes. It was going to be the 50s TV serials in 1 volume, and then everything else. And now Stuart's gone, well, actually, why don't we do a volume each for each of the 50s TV serials, and then do a volume on the films, and then do a volume on the later TV versions and all other iterations of Quatermass and beyond. So it will be now multi-volume, but that's partially because there's so much to say about the 50s serials, and I'm glad that I haven't had to cut everything, because, like, for example, I'd had to cut down. I've done a detailed biography of every single cast member, and I was going to have to lose that kind of thing because apparently some people aren't interested in such things. But when you've got a volume on each serial, you can do that. And apparently it's no different. So volume 1 is purely on the Quatermass experiment. It's not, sadly, now going to be out in time for September the 9th, our live version. It is going to be out, I'm allowed to say, apparently in December.
Splendid.
Hopefully in time for Christmas, but it will be out later in 2023, hopefully December 2023, because he's got to do, Stuart's brilliant publisher, he's done Paul Hayes' book. He's also now working with Simon Guerrier on his excellent and thoroughly researched David Whittaker book, but he's going to be working on that in conjunction with volume 1 of the Quatermass Files, which will hopefully be out in December and has lots of gloriously exciting stuff in it, even if you think you know your Quatermass. And if you don't know anything about Quatermass, well, I think it's quite a detailed introduction, which has and because it also means because also this extra time that I've taken from when I started doing it, I was able to go to the BBC written archives and go through everything there, but I've also found loads of other paperwork and had access to loads of other bits and bobs that nobody has ever seen.
Fascinating. It's interesting. I mean, we've just tying back again to Paul Hayes and how he uncovered stuff from 1962 and 63 for his book, and Waris Hussein is publishing his diary in the Radio Times earlier this year, and it's like 60 years on, and we're still finding out brand new information about something that happened back then.
Yes, I mean, I've torn myself away today from working on my Too Much Information podcast on Marco Polo, and I'm looking back to the editions I did on earlier episodes of Marco Polo, having thought I'd got pretty much everything out there. And then, of course, Waris Hussein publishes his diaries, and Too Much Information is sort of done in diary and date form. And there's a few bits where there's a few things we're not quite sure why they happened. And in Waris Hussein's diary, it explains why they have. Now, that's very useful for me for episode 6, which I'm working on now for Too Much Information, but it was too late for episode 3 or episode 2 or whatever. And that's as I'm sort of doing this, and the whole thing about Too Much Information was kind of going, well, let's collate everything we have out there, and what are the chances of, there's no chance of anything else coming, and the main thing to do is, particularly with that early Doctor Who paperwork, and this is why Paul's work has been so good, is because actually he had access to the same paperwork as the rest of us, but it's such a mess. And you can't search it because it's all PDFs if it exists, if it does exist in a sort of computery form, that stuff gets missed. And I used that example of the very first day of filming of Doctor Who being the 20th of August, which is Andre Morell's birthday, Sylvester McCoy's, Sophie Aldred's, Anthony Ainley's, my partner's. It's a great date for Doctor Who to start filming, unless you find that other bit of paper somewhere else in that massive pile that goes 20th of August cancelled, it's now the 29th. And everybody's been through that pile of papers and nobody's noticed that bit of that memo, which is also about something else, until Paul did when he was fresh eyes on it. But that's the nature of research, and that's the nature of writing. Whenever I write an obituary, it's only when I see it in print that I go, oh, I've used that word twice in the same paragraph. Why didn't I notice that the past 300 times I've read it in the past 24 hours? And it's because your brain does funny things, and that's why fresh eyes are always good, and that's why Paul's book, was, even though it's an area I've researched relatively recently, I found really, refreshing and interesting, and it was nice to have all that stuff sorted out and all that information all in one place, and the real trick, accessibly and nicely written too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you mentioned the book, Volume 1 out in December, but much closer is the live performance of the Quatermass experiment at Alexandra Palace, where it was originally broadcast live on television back in 1953. You are in a very distinguished cast. Tell us about that. Can
you imagine? What joy! I am such a lucky boy. Well, John Deere, who does the Berg Cast, which is an excellent podcast on Quatermass, and so I met John because he asked me to do an interview for his podcast. So of course I did, and we got on, and we involved each other in various projects. And John's a good guy, and we got real get up and go. And I introduced him to a couple of people and things, and this, that, and that. And then he did a Nigel Neal event, and he asked me to be involved in that, and I was, of course, more than happy to. And we did, as part of that Nigel Neal centenary event, we did a live reading of a lost radio play of his called "You Must Listen," and Mark Gatiss was there, and then we did a sort of smaller event in Derby, and we said, well, let's do another live Neil thing. So we did The Chopper, which was an Out of the Unknown play written by Nigel Neal that's lost, that actually originally starred Patrick Troughton. And they both, interestingly, they were there as sort of extra features, really, but everybody came away going, well, I love that, and I like the panels, and I like the screenings. But if you're a Nigel Neal fan, you've probably seen the Stone tape, you've probably seen episode 6 of Quatermass in the Pit. What you haven't seen is a live performance of a lost radio play of his, or so loads of people talked about those as being the highlight of the day, which I think had surprised all of us. We were happy to do it; it was nice to do, but they were pulled off really well, and it was great and unusual for that sort of event. And then John said, well, why don't we do the Quatermass experiment, because it's missing, because we only have the first 2 episodes, and the last 4 will never be seen. And there is a script book available, but the script book is actually more of a metamorphosis of the shooting scripts than you would think, especially if you've read the script books of Quatermass 2 and Quatermass in the Pit, which are very similar to the broadcast versions. He did change them a bit for the books, and actually he changed Quatermass Experiment quite a lot. Some of it just subtle, most lines have been tweaked here and there, but some scenes have been turned on their head, and one episode ending is completely different, and this, that, and the other. So nobody's really experienced the Quatermass Experiment as it was broadcast, and the camera scripts on the Quatermass DVD box set are in a parlous state. Mm-hmm. They're very, very bad photocopies, which are very dark and almost indecipherable. And there's a page missing from episode 6. So there was all sorts of reasons to do it, and John approached Alexandra Palace. So why not do it at the place that it was broadcast, where those actors said those words. And I used to live in the shadow of Alexandra Palace, so it was quite emotional going back there for me. But also, we went back on the day. We went back on July the 18th to launch this. So we were there following in the footsteps of the actors, and Mark Gatiss was there because Mark had expressed an interest in playing Quatermass, and so he firmed up and signed up. And I'd suggested Linda Marlowe, an actress I know, to play the dotty old lady character, which is quite a hard part to fill. And you think, who can we get who's an older lady? And I thought, well, Linda, but she'll probably have to age up. And actually, Linda is older than the old lady that played her character in the original, but doesn't seem it at all. The original was played by Katie Johnson, who was Mrs. Wilberforce in the Lady Killers, and is very and Linda. But Linda is also the daughter of Peter Bathurst, Chin from the Claws of Axos, who is in the Quatermass Experiment. So we have that lovely sort of link between old and new. And we went there. And they gave us a guided tour of the very studios on the very day that it went out in Alexandra Palace. But we couldn't. But the performance was the only way they could get I think they wanted a Saturday. They couldn't get July and August when Quatermass had gone out. So this was the date that was fixed upon, which is September the 9th. Mark was on board. I was on board. Scott Arthur, who did a series over here called Steeltown Murders, who'd lent his talents to You Must Listen and had kept in touch, was on board. I suggested Linda. She couldn't have been happier. So we all convened at Ali Pali, and that got a bit of notice. And then we sort of went, well, who can we ask? It's only a day. You know, we've got no rehearsal apart from the afternoon. So everyone's got the scripts now, but the cast are not convening until the day, and we're going to block it out, and we're going to do it like a radio play, but with the original music. I've got all the original music, and we've got a brilliant company, Hermetic Arts, Chris Lindsay and Carrie Thompson, who are working with John on producing it, are very good at doing very arresting stage stuff, but that has a sort of cinematic sensibility to it. So it is going to be the television version, but I saw somebody do a podcast the other day and went, it looks like it's a live reading. Why aren't they doing a production? And you go, well, do you not know the difference? The practical difference is doing a whole production and a live reading, in which case I think you need to start from scratch. We're doing it on one day, but because it's only one day, we said, let's be bold about the cast, especially as Mark's involvement will drag people in. So, and there's a really difficult part of Victor Caroon, which was played by Duncan Lamont from Death to the Daleks in the original Quatermass experiment. But he's the sort of Frankenstein's monster figure. It's the not very much dialogue, but really important. And that's hard enough on television. It's going to be even harder to do it on the stage, where he has to be this presence. But there's an excellent horror actor called James Swanton, who's tall and rangy and has a brilliant face and has a wonderful sort of otherworldly quality. And I had no idea who would be able to do Victor Caroon, especially as it's not a great sell because it's not many lines. And he's a great aficionado of all this stuff as well. And he agreed, and I think he's going to be such an exciting presence on it. But Alice Lowe from the film Sightseers and from Garth Marenghi's Dark Place is playing the Judith Caroon. We've got some cast haven't been announced yet, so I don't know if I'm allowed to. Sorry, I swore. We've got Andre Morell's son, Jason Morell, playing a key role. That hasn't been announced, but I'm going to tell them I've just announced it on Radio Free Skaro.
Well, listen, I'm looking at the Alexandra Palace website as you're talking about this, so I can tell you that his name is on there. So you're safe.
Oh, has it just gone up? Right. That's literally just gone up today. Then. Oh well, in that case, I can tell you everybody. We've got Charlie DeMelo, who's just left Coronation Street after 5 years starring in that, playing a major role in that, playing Dr. Gordon Briscoe. We've got some great comedy actors as well, Tom Bell and Adam Riches, and this was my idea. Kevin McNally is playing a great part, Detective Inspector Lomax, and I just, well, why don't we just ask him? And he went, yeah, all right. Well, he went, I'll see if I'm busy or not. And then emails back and forth going, oh yeah, I've forgotten, hang on, I'll get back to you in a minute. And then 3 weeks later, but we nailed him down. So McNally's doing it, which is really exciting. And I have a peach of a part of the journalist James Fullerlove, who is a sort of cynical journalist with a conscience, who in the original was essayed by an actor you may know and love called Paul Whitson Jones. So I'm delighted to be following in the footsteps of Whitson Jones, and it's a great part, and so I'm really thrilled to be doing that. So it's an amazing cast, but it's because it's just a day. And so if they've got a day free, they'll do it, and everyone's doing it for love, not money. It's very much, it's all very bare bones. But I think the ghosts of those actors and the spirit of Nigel Neal etched into those stones of Alexandra Palace will hopefully, and the audience who are there, we're not there to spoof it. We're not there to do COD 50s acting. We're there to resurrect this thing and make it live once more, but only briefly, before being lost to the ether again. And I think it will be really special, and I can't wait. And this is a career and a life full of rejection and disappointments and things that never materialize or don't turn out in the way that you want them to. But I think if this goes how I imagine it will go, and certainly with the talent that we've got, I think I must remind myself every now and again to go, you were part of that. That was really good. That was really special.
Well, it sounds absolutely fabulous. But, I do have to ask, for those of us like me who are not able to make it to the Alexandra Palace Theatre on Saturday, September 9th, do you know if it'll be recorded for posterity, or is it going to be intentionally not recorded? Or perhaps if it is,
no.
there'll be a fly wandering across the audio tape for...
Yeah, I just build a giant fly and bang it in front of the... We are recording it for posterity. The agreements we have with the cast are that it's, the contract is for a one-off live performance. So we will record it for posterity, but were it to be used on, commercially or at a screening or at a convention, we would have to go back and renegotiate with the actors. So not impossible, but it would only take one to go, well, no, I agree to do it on the understanding that it was a one-off. The intention is it's a one-off, you have to be there performance, because that's actually the only way we could make it financially viable. Because if we were paying people what they would get paid for something that would be commercially exploited, nobody would have the money to do that. There wouldn't be enough money to be generated by that one-off live performance for a putative thing that might never happen. Do you know what I mean? It's a purely practical thing, really, which I know sometimes, aficionados like us might see as an unnecessary frustration, but it's the reality of when you're, working with, self-employed creative people who need to be paid for what they're doing. And there's a difference between a one-off live performance where you're there for a day and something that's going to be, digitally, commercially available.
I mean, it was done that way back in 1953. After all, that's how it all started. Well, Toby, I mean, it's been a lifelong journey for you to not only to start watching Quatermass and writing a book about it and being on this, but to appear on the Radio Free Skaro to talk about it. So,
I love talking about it. And I wish more Doctor Who fans knew and loved Quatermass, because Doctor Who is obviously my first love and will always be very close to my heart. But boy, I do so admire Quatermass, and I think it if you love Doctor Who, there's plenty to enjoy in Quater. Did you like it? You go, because you said you watched Bit. I've never got what you thought of it, what you made of it.
I did. I thought it was quite fascinating, and as I said, I didn't actually realize it was live until after I read about it, because I didn't want to be spoiled. I mean, there's something to be said about 60-year-old television that people sort of like, well, I'll spoil something from 1959. Well, don't, if you don't have to, because then you can watch this completely unsullied. And I found it an absolutely entertaining production, but also just a fascinating production, because I look at archive TV as like an archaeological historical thing, I think, which is what interests me. I just love seeing how things are made. How I loved how when you pointed out on your Patreon commentary about how there's a scene with Arthur Hewlett and another actor sort of talking about things, and they're not really there to expand the plot. They're there to fill time so Cecil Linder can get from one set to the other in a live production. Yeah. It's stuff like that which I just find fascinating. And it was riveting. The Richard Shaw scenes were chilling. It was really good television. So I hope, dear listener, if you haven't had a chance to watch it, perhaps our chat today has opened your eyes to Quatermass, and perhaps you can track it down, because it is a really worthy predecessor to Doctor Who, especially, but also on its own right.
Yeah. Oh, and Roger, you must watch Quatermass too, then, Stephen, because Roger Delgado is in it as well.
I've heard tell.
And so is his car.
His actual car.
His car plays his own car. That's an exclusive from the book. There we go.
Coming out the first volume in December of 2023. Superb. Toby, it's been fabulous talking about Quatermass with you today. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for allowing me to come on and rabbit on.
Thank you, Toby. Hope the live reading goes off without a hitch. Hope the legs are broken. Is that what you usually say? Break a leg?
Break a leg, yes.
Actual leg on the scenery or something like that. Yeah, it's kind of cool. I've always been aware of Quatermass, but never fully understood it. And so I dove into that the Blu-ray that came out in 2018 with great aplomb. And yeah, really liked it. Spotted a couple Doctor Who actors in there, of course, because how could you not when you're me? Which is also kind of a bit of fun. And as Toby said at the end of the interview, Roger Delgado and his car are in Quatermass 2 from 1955. And so now
interesting.
I might want to watch that. Yeah. Yeah, his car plays itself. So there you go. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that, our chat with Toby about Quatermass and all the Doctor Who news that we talked about on this episode of Radio Free Skaro. Next week, more Doctor Who news, potentially, and other things regarding the show that we know and love. So until next time, I am Stephen in Edmonton.
Warren in Vancouver.
And Chris in Edmonton.
So long for now.
You've been listening to Radio Free Skaro. Find us online at radiofreeskaro.com. Follow us on Twitter and Tumblr at Radio Free Skaro. Subscribe to us on iTunes and donate to the show at patreon.com/Radio Free Skaro. Thank you.